I'm Joshua, and I'm an INTP. In this video, I just wanted to share a brief thought, but one that struck me with rather peculiar interest today. I was reading in my school's cafeteria or student lounge area, and I was reading several texts, and I do what I normally do, and thinking about the ideas and stare off into the distance, darting my eyes back and forth, trying to trace the train of reasoning and thoughts that are in my mind. And my imagination just overcame me, and as I always do, I succumb to the light of my imagination and intellectual investigations and drift off into just this fantasy space and reality that's not extant within the building but is in my own mind. And particularly why this occurred was because I was reading something on Christian philosophy and thought. It was speaking about the uses of the words Sheol and Hades in the Greek and Hebrew tradition, and how these places, they were places, but they weren't literal places. At least this is the conclusion that this scholar had come to. And I read various things like this just to expose myself to differing viewpoints and ideas, because I find that enormously interesting. The things that are foreign from me and the things that I don't understand or necessarily agree with or believe. And what was sort of profound about reading this and the experience I was having is that I asked myself, where is it that I go? And what it said about Hades and Sheol were that they weren't physical places, as in that they had some sort of physical dimension and manifestation as a place in which we would classically think it, as if I'm going to the store or I'm going down the street, that there is some sort of spatial temporal, I suppose, region. And it's so peculiar because it said it was a place, but it was a place because it was something that all men faced in the end, because death means one no longer thinks or dreams or has consciousness, essentially. And I found it rather peculiar that these places exist because of the lack of consciousness, and that generated just a thought in my mind, is that places, though they physically exist, it's rather a fuzzy line if one takes a metaphysical inquiry about what makes a place, because I go somewhere in my mind, and I think that anybody who's sat and experienced a boring situation realizes that they go somewhere in their mind as well. Or even anybody who's had an out-of-body experience or some sort of interesting transcendental experience, those are things that an INFJ friend of mine discusses with me about. And it got me thinking that place, the idea of place, or just what a place is something that has an intimate connection with consciousness. I don't know what consciousness is in the mind, and there's a great debate if consciousness is a real thing. But I know insofar as I am a subjective entity, and I have experiences in the world, or at least have some illusion to having experiences in the world, that there is this feedback mechanism and this point of interface between what I think is me and the rest of the world. And for me, this suffices as to say some sort of consciousness. And it seems that this thing, consciousness, it determines what a place is. Sheol was defined as a place where there was no consciousness. It is a place because there is no consciousness, which I thought was profound. If you're talking about death or hell, it's a lack of consciousness, But when we're going through experiences in life, I don't think we quite realize that going to a place is traveling some sort of conscious stream. Our thoughts, our conscious and rational mind, it is stacked upon our mammalian and reptilian brain, just an irrational flow and stream of consciousness that's humming and generating associations and information in the background, but our present thoughts are riding the waves of these things, because you will never make a decision where your subconscious or just the I think it suffices to say that the subconscious mind will not have some sort of interplay or saying or dictum in that decision. And that strikes me as so peculiar, because when we're making decisions, we're going somewhere. We're going to a place. I don't know necessarily where that is. I think one might argue that that's self-actualization, or a deprecation of self. One might say, if they're a theist, that's the kingdom of God or hell. One might say, if they're a Buddhist, that may be enlightenment or entrapment. But I don't know necessarily for myself what that is. I'm not particularly religious, but it's to say this, that you don't really go somewhere and you don't really have an experience unless a stream of consciousness pulls you there, unless the current of your thoughts are arriving to some new mental landscape and phenomenological experience. Well, phenomenological means an experience, but it's to say an event or a nexus point. Oftentimes when they, just some sort of social and dating research shows that if you want to strike a deeper connection with somebody within the first meeting of them, you travel to different places with them. So you may start your date in a coffee shop, but you should then take it to the park, and you should then take it to a art gallery and a movie, and then a concert, and you'll probably have a better chance at cementing some sort of impression on that individual and creating the illusionary feel of trust and connection. I say that because to me, it ties into this idea that consciousness determines where we go. It's going to a place is following a stream of consciousness. It's not necessarily stepping into a room, because you can step into a physical room, but you may not be there. So often people talk about being mindful, and I think it's a call for conscious awareness within a physical place, but it's so peculiar to me that we have this sort of spatial temporal orientation to life. We think we're in a place, therefore we're there, or we think because we walk this direction we're going to this place. And physically, yeah, that's true, but it just strikes me that mentally that may not be true at all, and that our mental faculties are concerned with going somewhere, and they arrive at a place, and that place may not be where we physically are. It's the imagination is so peculiar in this sense that you can read a book and you can go into the book and you can imagine what's going on and visit these fantastical lands and these extravagant adventures, but you're not going anywhere. It's just to say that, and this is only a thought. It's not an argument. It's just a peculiarity. And when I say something's a peculiarity, I just mean it's frightfully interesting, because there's so much ambiguity and so much of what can't be pinned down about the thing. But we may not be giving room for consciousness in the current talk of cognitive psychology, but I don't ever think that the word or the tool consciousness, insofar as it's a mechanism for understanding the human experience, should ever be lost, because it's a powerful descriptive instrument. Where does one go? And that, and as far as I'm concerned, that's a place. Where one goes in one's mind, that's a place. If a person is somewhere in a building, but they're not conscious of their existence or just their current experience, they're not there. And I don't know why it's like that, but that's just something I've been thinking about and something I realized. And so it leads me to say, at least for the tentative philosophical conclusion, that a place is a stream of consciousness. It isn't physically being somewhere. It's where the mind goes. And where the mind goes, we can try and engineer and determine it to our, I suppose, most gallant and valiant efforts, but we're not completely rational, and it just may be a futile one. I don't want to turn pessimistic, but it's just to say that when you're next time you're sitting in a room and your mind drifts off, just realize you're going somewhere. And anytime you go somewhere in life, it's because a stream of consciousness carries you there, whether it's physical or it's not physical. The mind, it's an interesting thing. I don't think that that means that things such as The Secret and all these other interesting New Age pop psychology things are true, but I do think that to have the ability to create abstraction and the capacity for language and a memory such as ours that has a reflexive and synergistic capacity in so far that it can structure itself and build out of its experiences new experiences that are a reconfiguration of bits of information of old experiences. That would be our imagination. I think that whatever this is, whatever our minds are, it's alarmingly fascinating and a privilege to be a human being. And just enjoy consciousness and realize that it very may well be the thing that takes you somewhere and not your legs. Thank you.